Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Future Proofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking to Syima Aslam, co-founder and director of the Bradford Literature Festival. The festival's now in its fourth year and was created to be the first of its kind to feature world literature and British literature on an equal footing. So welcome to Talking Through My Hat, Syima.
Thank you for having me on.
So first of all, how do you describe the festival these days to people who might not have heard of it? Are you following the same vision you did back in 2014, or has it developed into something more and different kind of over the years?
The festival itself has obviously developed considerably since 2014, but I think in terms of the ethos and the vision of the festival, that is very much the same. So the festival was always about the city itself and creating cultural regeneration in the city to support the economic regeneration that we had going on. So it was very much about a cultural renaissance. It was always about creating excitement about reading, around literacy, raising aspiration levels for our young people and children. And, that vision is very central and very much a core part of the festival and will continue to be so.
I always love when, every place has its own character, doesn't it? And it's finding ways to allow that to come out. As we were just saying before we record, I'm a Scouse lad, I'm from Liverpool. And, it's different being in Liverpool to Manchester, to Bradford, to Leeds, to whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. Every city has its own sort of unique ID, genetic code. Yeah. And I think with the festival, it very much reflects the city that it's in. So the idea always was to, when we first started talking about this, if you actually look at Bradford, it has people here from so many different parts of the world. There are so many languages. I mean, there's over 150 languages spoken in the city. And I always felt that actually, if we created a festival that was for the citizens of Bradford, it would automatically be of national and international interest. Yeah. And in terms of how the festival is programmed, if you look at our programming, it's very much about the written and spoken word in its widest format, and that's where it started from, and that's very much where it's at. So I've always said that there is nothing in the world that there isn't a book about, so there is nothing to talk about. Equally, we are the home of the National Media Museum. We are the world's first UNESCO City of Film, and these things are also reflected in the festival. We have a really fantastic theatre called the Alhambra Theatre. We have a really interesting arts and culture landscape in the city with lots of people working at grassroots level, but then sort of scaling that work up as well. So the festival has always been about celebrating all of those different elements. So we talk about books from a wide range of different disciplines, and the programming looks at everything from our literary heritage in the city, which is the Brontes, J.B. Priestley, Dunbar, to sort of wider interests like what's going to happen in the future. We have a whole strand around future living, which is very much looking at how will the world change? And we have so one of our key partners is the University of Bradford, and they are a leading technology university. So those things come together. So it's very much about reflecting the city that we're in. But actually, that allows me to create a really, really interesting, varied program.
So much to draw on. It's where the vibrancy and the interest comes from, isn't it? But as you kind of touched on it there. Back when you were first setting the festival up, where did the idea come from? Why did you decide Bradford needs a literature festival and I'm going to do it?
It was a number of things. I am a complete bookworm, so
excellent.
Yes, which helps. And I think it was a personal reflection as well. I felt if I looked at my life, books had really helped me. In terms of, so my parents were first generation, and we spent the first few first 8 years of my life shuttling backwards and forwards between the UK and Pakistan, and then I came back to the UK. I'd sort of gone through nursery, I had a couple of years in Pakistan, come back, and there's some very good family friends who said to my mother, you need to sort of settle yourself in one place, because she's never got education at this rate, because by the time I'd come back, I'd lost my English. So I went to a language centre. I sort of came out there pretty fast, but by the time I went to junior school, we were in what is now it would have been the end of year 5, and my vocabulary was atrocious. And went just in time for the end of year exams and got in my English vocabulary. And the next year I got 99%, and that was because I was taken to the library religiously every Saturday by my mother, and I read a lot. And that was what made the difference. Now, so to me, libraries and access to books is just so vital and crucial.
Yeah.
And the festival was actually about, I did some work in the education sector, and I'd been looking at the population stats of the city. And, with the youngest city in Europe, we have a growing youth population. And I felt that actually, if we wanted our young people to do really, really well, the key foundation stone to everything, no matter what subject you want to go into, it doesn't matter if it's STEM or maths, or if you're going to be going into skills training, you can't do it without literacy and without having a really good knowledge of English. And I think these things are things that cut across. They're not necessarily about ethnicity and race, or whether you have English as a second language. Because I was brought up with English as a second language. My mother doesn't speak English, but it didn't affect my ability with English. What affected it, what made that difference for me was the trips to the library and the books. I wanted to do something that would actually create excitement around books, get young people engaged, and actually get people generally within the city engaged with a literature festival. Yeah. And we had an interesting debate when I first set the festival up as to whether it was called a literature festival or whether it's called a book festival. Yeah. And, there was a feeling as to, if we called it literature festival rather than just a book festival, would that turn people off? Would some people who would feel that they weren't able to access the festival? It was,
that there's an image issue around the word, isn't there?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually felt it was really, really important that it was called a literature festival, because to me, we within the festival now, we have 4 days which are weekend days. Now, on each of those days, we create family fun days, which are which have literary themes. So our first day this year, and it's our sort of first day every year, is superheroes. And then, on Sunday we're going to be in space, and on the following Saturday we're going to be under the sea. And the last, we always finish with this, is a Harry Potter day. I'm a Potterhead.
Excellent.
And these are really fun, engaging activities, and they take place in City Park, which is, it's a beautiful water feature right in the middle of the city, accessed by lots and lots of different people. And what I wanted was that, young kids go along to those events, and they go along to the drop-in workshops, and they drop into the, the storytelling and the other book events that are going on. And they know that they're going to a literature festival, and therefore when they come across that word literature later on, it isn't a turn-off for them. And interestingly, last year when we had the festival, so our title sponsor is Provident Financial Group, who are, one of the biggest employers in the city. And they conducted an independent evaluation of the city, because obviously we do our own evaluations of the festival, rather. And the thing that they found, which was really heartening for me, was that out of the sample of people that they surveyed, 20% said, well, literature festival is not really for me. I wouldn't normally have considered going to a literature festival, but having come to the festival, 67% of them said, yeah, actually, I would see a literature festival as being for me. And that was really brilliant, because, we worked really hard with the programming to make sure that there is something in there that everybody feels that they can access. But like I said, there is nothing that there isn't a book about. So it's not that hard.
A festival, of course, isn't just about books. It's also a business. As you've alluded to, you've got to do assessments, you've got to get things planned and stuff. How do you go about learning to run a business?
I think I've been fortunate. I look back at sort of my working life, and it all seems to have been leading up to this.
It's funny, isn't it?
Yes. I've been fortunate in that the very first job that I did, I actually I mean, it was a tiny little inward investment agency in the London Borough of Hounslow, and I actually ran that for a year just because it was a transition period, and I had actually done my last placement with them. So that was good experience for me. I was working with board members, at director level with blue chip companies. I went on to work for Audi UK as corporate account manager. I was dealing with sort of finance directors. I've in my next job, I dealt with partnerships, and then I actually completely by a twist of fate, because it would never have happened otherwise, ended up running a business for about 5-6 years in Bradford City Centre, which was it was a dream and brainchild of my ex, but I ran that. So and I had a staff of about 20-25 people. So I'd had all of that grounding before I came to running the festival.
That's great. And how do you approach the festival? Do you approach it like you do another business, or is this something maybe a bit different?
The initial idea was just a complete sort of a dream passion project. But of course, the practicality of doing anything is that, of course, you have to be set up as a proper business in order to ensure that you can do something that is sustainable and can carry on over a period of time. Because what I didn't want for the festival, and what I wouldn't want for the festival, is that it comes along, and this is equally about the city and about the young people as well, that you create something, it's there for a year and then it's gone. You've created a tiny little change. It's
just a blip.
Absolutely. So a festival of this nature has to be it has to be part of the fabric of the city, and it has to be there for time to create the change that I would like to create.
Yeah. And what's your approach to kind of learning to do the business side of it better? Are you a kind of learning from people person? Do you go to books? I mean, you said you're a bookworm. I'm guessing there's a certain amount of reading involved, or websites, or is it kind of trial and error and throw it up in the air and see where it lands? Kind of, what's your approach to that?
Well, I mean, I suppose in terms of the business side, I have a certain amount of grounding in that. In terms of actually a festival, this is my first foray into the arts and sector. I had never run a festival before. I had sort of had small scale events at various things, but when I ran the restaurant, or when in my previous sort of incarnations when I was working in the corporate sector, I am very much a believer in that if you want to do something, you need to bring a hefty dose of common sense to it as well as anything else. And with the festival, it's been, there are a lot of things that are common sense, but there is always learning. You have to do your research as well. So, I've gone to other festivals and looked at how they do things. So I remember in the first year going to look at Oxford, going to look at Hay, and Hay was very much my inspiration. Actually, I looked at Hay and I was like, my God, this amazing festival, which is so known, and here in this tiny little Welsh, beautiful village, but it's not the easiest place to get to, and people have been very generous with their time. So Hay have been supportive. People have been happy for me to talk to them. I remember accosting, bless him, because this poor man is going up to one of the vice presidents of Hay, Justin Albert, who's the director of the Welsh National Trust, the first time I went to Hay, and saying to him, "You don't know me, but this is who I am, and this is what I do, and would you mind talking to me?" And he was actually very kind, because he gave me time, and we had a couple of phone conversations, and and there are things that people say to you and they stay with you. So he said to me, if you were setting up a festival anywhere else, I'd say to you, don't do it. That the country is saturated with literature festivals, but where you want to do it, it's actually really, really important. And he sent me through this really interesting paper which was talking about sort of culture and regeneration in Wales, but actually was applicable to where we were. So things like that have really, really helpful along the way. And this year we've actually partnered with Hay. So I've just come back from the Hay Festival. We ran 6 events there, and that's been amazing, to sort of go from asking them to actually doing something with them. And again, they've been very, very kind and very generous with their time. So I've found that people are very kind, and if you ask them, a lot of people will give you that time and will give you advice and will give you tips. So I think that it's a combination of things. The festival is growing. The aim was very much to create a national, international destination festival, and that's the direction it's going in. But obviously, from running two events in 2014, sorry, not two events, 2 days of 25 events in 2014 to now this year, where we have over 400 events across 10 days. That's a big change. So obviously the team has changed as we've gone along. I'm continuously restructuring, literally, at the moment I go through every year and I sort of think, okay. And even before I've got to the festival, I sort of think, okay, well, for next year. And you go through the festival, there's the learnings. And I think that's actually really key. You have to always be open-minded. I kind of very much have the approach. Certainly don't know it all. I'm very happy to take advice from whoever. So
yeah, that's kind of interesting. I say it's you're 4 or 5 years in. You've been growing at an impressive rate. As you think about the next 4 or 5 years, are you kind of thinking just about next year? Do you think, okay, in 5 years I want to be here, so how am I going to get there?
I mean, back in 2014, when the festival hadn't even started, it was very much looking at a 5-10 year vision, and that's very much the thing for me. And like I said, what I feel is really important for the city is that there is a festival that is part of the fabric of the city. It is there on a long-term basis, because I think we can't talk about engaging young people who may not have previously engaged, or for creating that cultural engagement for communities who may not have actually previously engaged, without it being a long-term process, because it takes, these are generational changes. You need something to be there for a long time for people to actually realise this is for me. We are, our audiences are growing every year, so which means that every year there are people who think about this festival and think this is something that is for them and that they are going to come along to it. And you need, it's really necessary that there is that long-term kind of vision. And I think that can be hard. And I think that is that thing, isn't it, of where it angels through tread. I had not done a festival previously. I had not worked in the culture sector, so I just sort of dived in first and was like, this is what it's going to be, with all the sort of the funding and structural change and challenges that go alongside that. But I'm completely unchanged in my thinking of, long-term strategies and a long-term vision. So, I mean, my aim and vision is very much that this becomes one of the premier festivals in the country, and it creates that generation change within the city. But obviously we bring people in nationally and internationally into the city, which is something we're starting to see. So I think that's really heartening. I think with anything you can think about things and you can talk about things. It's the proof is always in the pudding, and with the programming as well, you sort of dream up these ideas. So I cook up these things which I think, this is really fantastic and it'll be really brilliant. But it's not really until you put it out there that you actually know what the reaction is going to be.
Yeah, and people will let you know if it worked or if it didn't. I think it's really interesting, isn't it? One tends to think from the outside that literature festivals are about books, and of course they are.
Yes.
But it's really interesting to see you've got a very clear kind of a dual vision going on, that the books are very important to you, but there's this external social goods aspect to it, that it's not books for their own sake. Yeah. You're trying to achieve something more than just that, which is, it gives you that direction, doesn't it? That kind of steer of where you think you should be going.
Absolutely, but I think that's what books are about, though. I think for me, people write books for a reason. There's a story that they're trying to tell. There are issues that are important that they want to talk about, or it may be a personal story, it might be, historical issues, it might be things that we are talking about at the moment. And I think it's writers and are always on the, they look at society and they talk about the future and they create visions, and I think that's really, really important. So while yes, from one angle, the festival is not just about books for the sake of books. On the other hand, it is very much about books for the sake of books. Because actually, I don't think that there is anything that we talk about in the festival, or that there is anything that I'm trying to create in terms of, when we talk about the engagement that we want to create, the changes that we would like to see in terms of young people. None of these are things that haven't been discussed in books. So it's all quite intrinsically linked. And I just think, I think with the times that we live in, books are really important, because we need empathy. We need to understand how other people feel. And books and words, to me, that they build bridges. They bring people together. Yeah. It's and it allows you to see just how, I mean, there is just so much commonality in the human experience. And I think that's something that books and words get across. But I mean, I'm quite democratic about words. I look at films. At the end of the day, you peel that top layer back of a film. It's words, script that someone's written. It's the same with theatre. Music. It's lyrics. So I think words are kind of, they're really essential to us, and they're really key. And it doesn't matter whether how you access those words, whether you come to it through music or film or theatre, you're accessing those really, really key ideas. But I think to me, books, they just are these amazing portals which just open a door into a whole other world. And every time you step through, for me,
that's the kind of that's that key, isn't it, of the festival? It's opening doors to people to say, look, this is for you. It's for everybody. Come and experience and enjoy and learn and grow. And
absolutely, it's kind of like the basic building blocks of human communication. Is words, it's language, and books are just another form of conveying that.
So as you look back over the last few years of doing this, of this immense growth and doing this new thing you'd never thought of before and never experienced, what have you learned about yourself over that time? Do you still think of yourself as the same person you did 5 years ago, or have you learned? No, have you? Have you winkled out bits of yourself you didn't know were there?
I think, in all honesty, for the last 5 years, I have been very heavily festival focused. It is for me, it is a complete passion project, and no matter what the size, from when it was, when it's 25 events to when it's now over 400 events, for me, they are, they are all still equally important. And I think all my, it's been a 24 hours a day, 7 days, kind of all passion.
Yeah.
Have I learned lots about myself? I think doing the festival has been it's a real privilege. It's a pleasure and it's a privilege. I mean, as I said, I am a complete bookworm. I am a complete, I meet people and I'm just like, I'm blown away by the fact that I'm meeting these amazing people whose work that I read. So, that's really, really lovely. But I think it's allowed me not just to think about things, but to actually, to create things that actually, to think about what is important, what are the things that we need to address as society, etc., and to create events around that. I think I've learned lots about myself in terms of patience levels. It's how far my patience can be stretched, and sorry, I'm slightly joking there, but no, it's been an interesting learning experience, and I think you can't do anything like this without actually learning lots of new skills, but actually seeing sides of yourself that you might not necessarily have accessed in other things that you've done. But I think my friends who know me really well, I mean, I remember speaking to one of my friends who said to me, it's kind of your mental DNA, isn't it? And I was talking to one of my staff, and we'd had this, as we're doing an interview now, we'd had this sort of interview request, which was, can you describe yourself in 3 words? And I said, it's really hard. What am I meant to say? And she said, well, you could say you are an insane geek. So yes, I realised just actually how truly geeky I am. I hadn't realised actually I am a geek.
Well, that's good. Being able to explore your inner geek and make it your outer geek is just fantastic.
Not everybody gets that privilege.
Brilliant. Well, I always do like to ask, what's the thing you find hardest about the work, and how you do overcome that?
What don't I like? I think the passion point is the festival itself. It's the events. It's creating those events, bringing those people together. I think the hardest thing, and I think this is probably across the board, is that actually there is a framework that you have to create to pin all of that to. You can't just sit there and create the events and then they happen. That there is the financial side, there is the administration, there is actually the running of an organisation, and I think there is that challenge of how do you keep doing the thing that you love without getting completely consumed by that other side, because that is actually that's what makes the thing that you love happen. As we've grown, I've expanded my team, so I can do finance, but I wouldn't say I'm a finance expert. So, I have, I now have somebody who looks after things on that side for me. I've brought in other people to support me on other things.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is part of actually growing a team and actually learning to let go a little bit of certain things. Which I can be the hardest thing as well. I would happily admit to anybody that I am a complete control freak. I want to make sure that it's all done and it's all done to the standard done. And
and particularly when you grow from a small organisation, when, as you said, you're doing everything to start with.
Yeah, so and
it's like you've got to let go and give other people.
Absolutely, let other people come in and do various things. So I think it's actually balancing that.
So what's the thing? And I think I know the answer to this, but what is the thing that keeps you coming back every day to do this mad, insane festival in Bradford?
The books. I keep reading. I keep having phases where I keep trying not to read just because I have this insane thing where if I get really engrossed in a book, that can be it. I might completely forget what time it is. I can't do that thing of where I'll go to bed at midnight and think, I'll just read for 5 minutes, and 4 hours later I think that was a really bad idea. That was a really bad idea. So I think I keep reading books, I keep reading articles, I keep seeing things, and it keeps making me want to create new events. And I think that always keeps coming back. Yeah. And I think things keep, the world around us is such an interesting place. Things keep happening, and there are conversations that need to be had. And I'm, I suppose, really committed to trying to make sure that we have those conversations and we develop empathetic links with each other. And it's that I think also that keeps me coming back. And then, I'm really pleased and happy with where we are in terms of the work that we're doing with schools and with young children. And you read, there are times when you get tired, and then you read some of that feedback, and and you feel like actually that's actually really made a difference to someone. And I think that can be sometimes that can be hard, because sometimes you get so engrossed in actually that running of the thing that you forget about the impact that it has. And I think also for me, because you're so in the middle of the festival, that actually you don't always see that, but that is actually really, really key. That encouragement that you get from people where they come and they say, I listened to this conversation and it made me think of X, Y, and Z, or it really touched me, or or where we have feedback from teachers about young children who've come along and then they wanted to set up a book club, or they wanted to do some poetry, or they wanted to do whatever, or it's helped with their confidence, or they've now thought that actually, because they saw that person on stage who looks like them and is doing X, Y, or Z, they can actually do it. It's all those things. Yeah. That's, I think, what makes keeps you going through the slog.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much. That's a fascinating conversation. All the best for this year's festival. And obviously, if anyone out there is anywhere near Bradford at the end of June, beginning of July, you should obviously go to the Literature Festival.
Even if you're not near Bradford,
absolutely.
We are very welcoming people.
Definitely. Thanks very much for your time, Syima.
Thank you.
I do want to thank Syima again for that fascinating conversation, particularly, of course, in the last few weeks before this year's festival takes off. She's been, of course, very, very busy at the moment, and it was fantastic of her to make the time for this conversation. It's wonderful to hear people talking about, the importance of literacy and of libraries, that books are these amazing portals that open doors for us. And tying that love of books to a real concern for the success of the people in her city, in her place. Plus, of course, when you're starting a business, that great advice that you can rely on the kindness of strangers, but equally not being put off just because other people don't share your vision and passion. You need to keep hold of your own long-term vision. Do come back next week when I'll be talking to Tom Chalmers of Legend Press. He was one of the youngest people to found a publishing company, so that's a really interesting conversation. Do come back then. Of course, if you want to get notifications of the next podcast episode, do sign up to our mailing list, which you can do at myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. And that will come as well with news every week from around the industry. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hopefully talk to you again next week. This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Future Proofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.